Greetings and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Psychic Inside Show. My name is Joelle. I'm the host, and I'm also known as the Viberarian. I'm here to elevate, enlighten, and empower you with information that I hope that you find positive and uplifting. Every Tuesday evening, we're here at 9 p.m. on the Viberarian Radio Network on Blog Talk Radio, and we're getting to have conversation with people who have discovered their psychic gifts and abilities. You can tune in to the Viberary on blogtalkradio.com/theviberary, and that is B as in vibration, I-B-E as in energy, R-A-R-Y. And I've also got a Facebook page where I'm bringing people together. I like to call it the Good Vibe Tribe because we're all sharing information with each other in an effort to improve ourselves. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter with the same handle, and that is at the Viberarian, and that's T-H-E-V as in vibration, I-B-E-R-A-R-I-A-N. And I would definitely invite you to join our community over there because I'm posting follow-ups from the interviews that we have with the various psychics, and there are events and activities, and I'm always trying to spread the news about opportunities for you to grow yourself in a positive way. If you're on Instagram or Twitter and you see something that's positive or uplifting, be sure to tag me because I definitely want to amplify that and pass it along to my network as well. I'm so excited to have everyone join us for these shows. Every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. is the Viberarian show, and that is just a topical exploration. It's like a cross between Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and X-Files. We don't leave any stone unturned, and we're talking about everything from Akashic records and divination, extraterrestrials, dreams, lucid dreaming, and just anything that you can imagine. That's every Thursday night on this same channel, same phone number. If you're listening in on our line, which is 646-668-8988, and you have any questions for our guests during the show, please just hit the one button. Let me know that you would like to come on the air, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. As you know, sometimes during the Psychic Inside Show, our guests provide readings at the end of the episode during the last segment. I just wanted to let those of you know who like to hold that we are not having that this evening, but I will be providing information where you will be able to reach out to tonight's guest at a later date to find out more about her amazing healing services. So I'm really so excited this evening for my guest because, it's kind of funny because I feel like I know her. And the reason why is because I've been signed up to her newsletter for a couple of years now, I think nearly 2 years. And I have found her posts to be so insightful, and she's very transparent and authentic as it comes across in her messages, and I feel like I'm sitting down having a cup of coffee with an old friend when she relates her journey and wisdom to the reader. So I'm very excited this evening to welcome Janet Raftis to the show. Janet, welcome to the Psychic Inside Show.
Thank you, Joelle. I'm excited to be here and to be chatting with you.
It's quite interesting because, it makes me giggle because, I met you a couple years ago when you were providing services at the Blue Barn in Atlanta, which has a long-standing psychic fair. And I think I sat with you once or twice, and immediately you signed me up for my newsletter, your newsletter. Fast forward until maybe 8 or 10 months ago, and I connected with this wonderful couple on Instagram who was offering coaching and counseling. So I signed up to talk with them, and they were like, "Oh, you live in Atlanta? We used to live in Atlanta." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I used to live in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta. I love it, too." And the lady, I think is Natha, is how you pronounce her name. She said, "You may know my friend Janet Raftis." I was like, "Oh, my gosh, I do." And I think she had just come back from one of your retreats. So I know that you are a retreat facilitator because I've seen them announced in the newsletters. You've been to Costa Rica and beautiful places where you are helping people to heal themselves, both in an energetic and a spiritual level. How long have you been doing this kind of work?
Healing work in general?
Mm-hmm.
I started with Reiki training. That was about 14 years ago. And, it was kind of a slow start at first. I did a lot of self-healing the first couple of years. And that was my primary focus. I was living in Costa Rica at the time with my ex-husband. My son had just been born. And I was going through a very difficult period. And so Reiki was really, it was such a light for me. And so I started, like I said, 14 years ago. I quickly became a Reiki master. And then I've been, in practice for about 7 or 8 years and full time in that for about 4.
And so Reiki just kind of clicked for you personally. You quickly kind of felt the ability grow in yourself then as you were working through your own healing process?
Yeah, I think what I really noticed was that what it did was activate the healer that was already within me. It helped me to understand a lot of things about my life, about my really high sensitivity to energy from the time I was a very small child. I was able to see energy, feel energy. I was highly empathic, so I could feel what everybody was experiencing around me, and always as an empath will want to do, trying to change it. And my hands were always burning hot growing up, and I was, when I was growing up, I thought I was like so embarrassed about it. And then once I started, right, I was like, oh my God, and my first boyfriends, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, oh, I got the sweaty hands, but it all made sense, it all made sense once I started working with healing energy. I was like, oh God, yes, this is it. This is all of it. This makes sense.
So once you started the Reiki practice and worked through your own healing process, that's, I have Reiki certification as well, but I don't practice really on others, but on myself, absolutely. And even at different times in my life, I found that Reiki came to me, opportunities for that really were when I didn't even know how much in need of healing I truly was. And then through my Reiki attunements and things, I discovered, wow, I really am ungrounded. I understand, I understand that. So as you started to heal yourself, did you move into pranic healing at that time? I know that you also are a multimodal energetic healer.
Yeah, so I started working with pranic healing. I took 3 different courses in pranic healing. That was about 3 years ago, maybe. And I also studied matrix energetics around that time. So, and I use all 3 modalities in my practice, but I also, because I'm psychic and because I'm a medium, I also really have a very free-flowing energy healing practice where I use those modalities, but I'm also communicating with everybody's, tribe, their spirit tribe, and they're telling me what to do. They're really running the show. So I am multimodal, but even within that, it's very open. It's very open.
That seems to be a common thing that I'm hearing amongst people today who say that the rigid structures of there is the way to do something. You make a cake and you do it this way and you don't add any extra pinches of anything, or you're not doing that thing. But from what I'm hearing is that many people are moving out of that rigid structure into more of a personalized expression of whatever their gifts are. And it seems like people beat themselves up sometimes because they think I'm not doing it right. Now, did you have that kind of natural then morphing, or was that challenging to you at all in terms of as you began to acquire certain skills?
No, it was very natural for me, and I really trusted it. I really, really trusted it. And in fact, at some point, I stopped saying that I practice Reiki. I mean, I share that I'm trained in Reiki, and I teach Reiki because I think it's a very simple and beautiful and effective healing tool. But I stopped saying that I was practicing Reiki because I really didn't feel like it was a Reiki session per se, right? But I trusted it. And really what I believe, like one thing that is sort of the cornerstone of my practice is, you know, it doesn't matter what modality you're using. Like any modality that you use can produce miracles. We are drawn to the ones that resonate to us initially. And for some people, structure is good. Like pranic healing is extremely structured. And if you follow a certain protocol, you can expect to get certain results. And that's great. For some people, that works really, really well, you know. But what I've discovered is that it's really intention. And for me, it's intention and following the guidance that comes through. That's how I seem to work the best. But what is so important is not necessarily the modality that you work with, but how you show up as a healer. You know, have you done your healing work? Are you empowered in the energy that you're using? Are you a clear channel? Are you able to, you know, how are you interacting with the clients? Are you working in integrity, so forth and so on?
Yeah. Now, the matrix, what is it? Matrix energy healing you discussed. What is that?
It's a modality that was started by a man named Richard Bartlett, and he was a naturopath and a chiropractor, and he, you know, as happens with many healing modalities, he stumbled into it. He did something one day with one of his clients, and a miracle happened. And he was a very open person, very open to spirit, very open to receiving messages from his guides. And they shared with him, you know, different techniques to use. And it's really a fun modality. It is probably the funnest modality I've been exposed to, because whereas with Reiki, you're channeling, right? The healing energy is coming through you. Same with pranic healing. It's a little bit different in the way that it is executed, but it's mostly a channeled modality. Matrix is really playing and interacting with the field. It is about, I will say manipulating, but manipulating in the highest form, right? The way energy works and the way energy, like different frequencies and vibrations, interact with one another, and how you can influence and shift certain vibrations by working with the field in different ways.
So what does that
kind of
look
like being
like
a wizard?
So what, I mean, like if you're in a session with a client and something presents itself, say an inner child wound or some other type of deep trauma, how does that playful energy that you're speaking of then manifest itself? Can you give an example?
So sure. So, and I do see a lot of one of my gifts is I'm able to psychically see the origin of trauma. And so I work with the inner child a lot, and actually the retreat work that I do with my colleague and friend Alicia Miller is a lot of working with the inner child, which is specific to her modality as well, which is core emotional healing. So when I am in a session with someone and the wounded child comes up, the inner child, I usually I see what happened. Was it a trauma? How did this limiting belief or pattern start? What happened here? What's going on in the nervous system as a result of it, et cetera. So there's like many different things that I could see here. And then we can work with the energy. And Matrix is great for this because Matrix works really well at helping to shift patterns. And so you can you can access through, there's different ways to work with the matrix energies, but you can access different frequencies, and the different frequencies can help to shift the energy. Now, in an inner child situation like what I just described, so let's say that I'm working with an inner child who I see was abused in some way as a child, and we can say that it was verbal abuse, let's say. So if I see someone who's been verbal abused, I might see them like curled up, and I might see words flying at them in anger. Like that's how it might come to me.
Okay.
And then, so one thing that I would do I would probably start with the Reiki energy, because Reiki energy is so loving and warm. But in that Reiki energy, I would access that energy of the child at that age. Okay, so let's say the child's 3. I would go into the energy field of the child at the age of 3, and I would hold that child in this healing energy. And then I would also work with Matrix. Probably after I did that, I would work with Matrix to start shifting the energies as they started to unfold. So there would be, from that experience, let's say most likely a sense of disempowerment, a sense of victimization, an inability to express oneself, right? So we can start using Matrix to work with those energies to see where the limiting beliefs are playing out, and to start the process of shifting the energy with it. And most likely there are things that need to be expressed there, right? Emotions that need to come out, and actually physical things that need to happen beyond the healing session. But with the energies, we can start to shift that and help the person to feel strong enough to emote in the way that they need to emote.
I imagine that's not just like a one-time kind of session. If it sounds something that is more in depth. Yeah. So it is. With some things, everybody's different, right? And everybody's healing journey is different, and every session is different, and everybody's openness to receiving is different. So, you can look at someone like Jesus, right? And Jesus had absolute faith, 100% faith. And the people that Jesus was healing also had absolute faith that he could heal them, right? So he performed many, many miracles. Now, we don't hear about the instances where maybe a miracle didn't happen, but there probably were some, right? He probably didn't have a 100% track record, but he was really good at what he did because he had 100% faith, and the people that he was healing had 100% faith. So I've seen absolute miracles happen in my practice as well. Even people who didn't believe in it necessarily have had miracles occur. So sometimes one session's enough for one thing, right? If it's a particular thing, like I'm thinking of a client of mine who had experienced paralysis on the side of his face as a result of some nerve endings being cut during an operation to remove a tumor. And he, after one session, it was a remote session. It wasn't even in person. It was a remote session. He was a skeptic. he had partial sense. They told him he would never have sensation there again, and that he wouldn't be able to move those muscles ever again. And he has had partial return of sensation there. So that's a miracle, right? Now, absolutely.
I'm sure there are other things that he can work on, right? But for that thing, he experienced a miracle. Now, mostly we're more complex than that, right? And somebody who comes to me and says that they're having, horrible relationship pattern, like they, keep falling for the wrong man, they're in an abusive relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And we look in, and that's the scenario of what I was just describing to you. That person is most likely, going to need to have more sessions or other work too. So another thing is that I will refer out to the appropriate person if it's something like if somebody needs to work on expressing their emotions and finding their voice in that way and becoming empowered in that way. I will refer to Alicia Miller, or I will refer to somebody else who has a specialty that supports the work I'm doing with the client, right?
Right.
But yes, some people can come to me once, and even people, I've had one client who had such extreme anxiety that she was shaking mean, it almost looked like she was having DTs, but it was just shaking. It was just anxiety, nightmares, so forth and so on. After one session, she was like, I mean, she wasn't completely healed, but the shaking stopped. The nightmares went away. She was so much better that she came back, I think, once more. And after that, I've seen her, I don't know, that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I've seen her maybe twice since then. Like, she's doing really good.
Okay.
So it can happen, but it also might not. And there's no judgment there. It's no right or wrong. There's no one way it can happen or that it should happen, right? It's just whatever that thing is that we're working with, whatever our healing journey is around it. And sometimes I've found that when if there is a spontaneous healing, we might miss the message. We might miss the lesson, right? So sometimes the healing process unfolds so that we can have a deeper understanding of ourselves. When I went through my healing process, which took a long time, I mean, I was depressed. I was anxious. I hadn't healed from a rape. I mean, I had a lot of stuff going on. And the 3 or 4 years that I did like deep and intense and regular self-healing were amazing for me. I learned so much about myself. I learned stuff that, like you said earlier, that I didn't even know that I could have known about myself. Like, I didn't even know I was going to discover this stuff. I learned stuff about the energetic DNA that was passed. I didn't even know what this stuff was at the time. I was like, what the hell is that? I was like, my grandmother is my root chakra.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was a beautiful experience. And if I had just spontaneously healed, I would have missed all that. And I would not be as effective as I am now with my clients,
But the soul knows what the soul needs, right?
Yes, exactly. Right? Exactly. Yep.
Now, how did you go from, like, I want to say run-of-the-mill, but of course Reiki is not run-of-the-mill, but from a basic understanding of feeling energy in your hands to realizing that you could see the wounded inner child sitting in the corner with the words being thrown at them. How did that come into your awareness? I guess you call it claircognizance, clairvoyance, and the clairs.
Yes. Okay. So when my gifts opened back up again, because I had numbed them for many, many years, and then when I got pregnant, I stopped numbing, and it was like insane. It was so crazy how everything opened back up again. It was really intense, really hard to deal with. And so that was one of the reasons that I think was led to Reiki. And it was definitely synchronicity because I was living in a small town in Costa Rica. So when I started doing the Reiki, I didn't have anyone to teach me this stuff. I had to figure a lot out, which is another part of my journey, right? Because I had to figure so much stuff out. I think that I have a very deep understanding of a lot of it. And so the first things that really opened up for me again, other than, being able to sense everything energy, I could see and feel and taste energy, everything. But my clairvoyance was not that open. Other than seeing energy, it was not that open. I didn't see things at the time. But my clairaudience was very open and my claircognizance was really strong and my clairsentience. So I was able to utilize those senses, and eventually the clairvoyance started to fill in, right? It was like it started as having an understanding of what I was seeing. I didn't see it at first, but I knew exactly what it looked like. I knew what it smelled like. I knew what it sounded like. And then at some point I started to just see images. It started as seeing photographs, and then it went to seeing some video clips, and it's largely symbolic. I mean, I do see literal stuff sometimes, but I, have a background in literature. My master's degree is in Spanish literature. So I think I was very immersed in metaphor and analogy for a huge part of my life, right? So the way I receive information is typically very metaphorical. I remember one good example of this is that I saw an image. I was working with a man, and it was a remote session, and I saw an image of him roller skating on marbles when I was working on his root chakra. And I was like, roller skating on marbles. And, you know, and I described this to him, and he was like, that's exactly what I feel like.
Wow. You're like, what is that image? Okay.
It's like, you have a very unstable root chakra.
All over the place. Now, when you were, before the clairvoyance came in, when you were, you know, kind of empathetic, certainly, so that's kind of what more aligned with clairsentience. And then the claircognizance would be you understanding the energy that you were feeling in the room or around people, like knowing more about what it is a person is emitting than what they may know about themselves. But did you understand it as clairs at that time, or did you then also study the, like, how did you figure out, well, I'm feeling something and this is somebody else's emotions, that energy? How did you transition?
So I didn't know what the names of them were except for clairvoyance, and I didn't have clairvoyance. So, you know, there was a little period where I was like, well, I'm feeling all this stuff, but I'm not psychic. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm totally psychic. Like there was definitely a process in that too, right?
Right.
So it was really, I was actually very, I want to say that I felt very overwhelmed by it. And a lot of my early story, once I started working with healing and doing this stuff, was me trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Like, really? Okay. It was just me trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I was fortunate to come across a mentor, probably maybe 3 years into my doing Reiki. A woman moved to the town I was living in who was a healer, a psychic medium, and she became a good friend of mine, and she was my first mentor. And she was a really beautiful woman who taught me a lot. And I also started voraciously reading. I read so much. I mean, I got like I would have my mom every time my parents went down to visit us. I would order books for her to bring me down, like books. And so that was it was a big part of like putting names, like you said, like I had to put names to what was happening to me, which was so validating, right? So validating. I'm not crazy. Like this is
right.
Like, and you know, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't grow up with a religious background. I was very agnostic when I started doing all this stuff. And it was a process for me of being like, I mean, I was doing Reiki one day and I was like, there is a God. Like, I remember being like, there is a God.
Wow.
And I am working with that energy right now. And it was like, it was immediate. It was like beyond faith. I knew it as absolute truth. And then I was like, but there are no angels. I mean, I was like Joelle. I was like stubborn at first. I was like, there are no angels. Angels are stupid. And then I was in a session, and it was like, boom, there was Archangel Michael. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Not only are there angels, but this is some dude named Archangel Michael.
Right. Right.
Oh, and I was just hard-headed. And then I was like, but there are no fairies. I mean, this is like my story. I'm like, there are no fairies. Fairies are total make-believe. And then I was like, what happened next? I was like, oh, not only are there fairies, but they're all around me.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure they were snickering like, oh, she thinks we're not real. Wait till we show her.
Totally. I mean, totally. It was so like that. And at that point I was like, you know what? I mean, it was a big realization for me. I was like, I am the only thing limiting my understanding of spirit. Like, I got it so crystal clear in that moment, right? That the only limitation is the limitation I'm placing on this. It is an infinite universe. That means that there are infinite possibilities, right? Anything that I can even conceive of exists and more. I can't even conceive of I can only conceive of the smallest fraction of it. Right.
You know, that is so key. That's one of the reasons for me to do this show, is that, you know, I believe that everyone is psychic. You just don't recognize it. And so to have that common experience of like, you know, I don't know what the heck is going on. I do feel, and that word crazy is used quite a bit, you know, haphazardly and in a kind of definitely self-deprecating way of, well, you know, me, I hear voices, but I'm just crazy. But it really, instead of being something you responded to and shut down again in your adult life, the fact that you decided to say, well, hey, you know, I'm hearing things, I'm feeling something, and I just know exactly who that person is as soon as they walk in the room, and there's got to be an explanation for that. You know, and this you said is like over a period of about 14 years, then that you're slowly unfolding the layers of what it is that's developing in you. Now, when you were a child, you did say that you had abilities that were more fully open at that time. What was that experience like for you in childhood?
You know, it's so interesting.
Other than the high hands.
It's, you know, it's one of those things that as a child, all I felt was like the world was too much. I mean, it was just too much. I always felt like I was at fault a lot. I felt like people were mad at me or upset with me because they would tell me, you know, they would say that they were fine, but they weren't. I knew they weren't. There was something going on underneath the surface. So I assumed that it was at me and they just didn't want to tell me about it. I, from a very early age, was trying to manage the energies and emotions of people around me, which is impossible. But when you're little, you don't know that. And it was really hard. It was as soon as I was at an age where, you know, and I grew up in Southern California in the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, once I was at an age to experiment with things that would numb me, they were all over the place. I mean, it was easy. And that was the route I took because I didn't know. I mean, it was just, just to say that it was too much. That was really the best way to put it. It was just too much.
A lot of people have that experience then where they are so intensely experiencing things that numbing or self-medicating is happening. And so you're talking about like your early 20s or late teens type as you're going out into the world.
Early
that kind
teens.
of experience?
Like early teens it started for me and went into my early 30s. So it was more than just being an introverted, you know, and quiet type of child. It was very much almost, I've heard people say it's almost like being assaulted by the world. It totally felt like I was being, it totally felt like I was being assaulted by the world. That's a really good way of saying it. And all I could say is I just wanted it to stop, you know. Yeah.
And so you were trying. The part about I'm a Libra, so that balancing of other people's energy is definitely something that I've had to learn to be grounded in myself because it led to codependent dynamics and patterns of me trying to problems that weren't mine and owning other people's crap, you know. And I don't consider myself highly empathetic, but for people who are so sensitive like that, to be able to say that you feel emotions as a physical, it's like the air is thick, the energy is tangible, and that you're then receiving all of that of everyone around you. And the more intimate the relations, such as family dynamics and partners and emotions, did you tend to wind up aligning then or finding yourself in situations with people who were the opposite of that and were seeking a person to put their energetic garbage on?
A lot of the times. I mean, I definitely have had experiences with, you know, narcissists and very wounded on the other side of the spectrum people. that was definitely a part of my journey as well. I work with a lot of people who have the same experience. And, you know, another thing about being empathetic, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of your audience, is that it's not just people either. Like, you know, I was feeling all the stuff of all the people, but you're feeling all the stuff. And for some of us, I mean, there are different types of empaths. I'm highly empathic with people, with animals, with nature, with rooms and houses. And I mean, I can be in a house and I can feel the emotions of the house. I was watching a movie. I was watching The Zookeeper's Wife on the airplane last week or the week before, and there's a scene where a zoo gets bombed in World War II in 1941, and immediately I burst into tears because I felt the pain of all the animals in 1941, like the animals that were really there, you know? And so you know, that was, you know, 80 years ago or whatever. So, I mean, it's just, and now I know what's happening, right? Now I can understand. I'm feeling the pain of all the animals, and it's their pain, and I can understand that, and I'm sensing it, but it's not mine, and I have tools now, right, to not carry it with me. But when you don't have tools, like, that's really intense.
Right. I can imagine that would be pretty draining energetically of your personal reserves to a great deal. Have you wound up limiting yourself in terms of media consumption or certain environments now, or do you manage things in such a way that you really don't have problems interacting with certain kinds of energy when they're presented? You're in a nice little bubble, or do you just say, I'll take a pass, I'm not going to that?
It's a little bit of both. I manage my energy really, really well now. When I first started doing energy healing work, when I started my, you know, practicing on other people on a regular basis, I could only do probably 3 or 4 sessions a week. And, you know, I do 6 or 7 sometimes in a day now. So I can definitely hold my energy a lot better. I can maneuver in the world a lot better. I consider myself a self-cleaning oven. I kind of laugh, but I am a self-cleaning oven. And that said, that's a good visual, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But that said, you know, I take care of myself too, because there are days that I'm tired. There are days that I'm hungry. There are days that I have emotional stuff going on. And when I feel those, when I'm having those experiences, I still, even though I'm good at taking care of my energy, even though I'm a self-cleaning oven, there are days that I have to be careful. And I try to, I practice a lot of awareness around my what's going on with me. You know, a lot of times I have to say to my partner, I'm in a bad mood, and when I get home, like, I sometimes need, like, time to myself to regenerate or to walk the dog or to go to the park. Like, I need a buffer zone. And then also I'm careful about where I'll go. Like, the Kroger by our house, you know, I usually shop at, like, Whole Foods or Trader Joe's because the energy is so much better. It just feels better to me. The Kroger by our house is actually built over land where a Civil War battle was fought. I mean, going there is not a you know, warm and fuzzy experience for me. So sometimes I have to go there, and because it's the closest place to my house. But if I'm feeling fatigued, I either take a lot of awareness in there with me that I'm fatigued, I'm going in, I know exactly what I'm getting, and then I'm getting out, and I'm using all my tools, or I skip it if I can, or drive further to go somewhere else. So I just bring a lot of awareness. I'm good at taking care of my energy. I also recognize what my triggers are with it, you know?
Right. And that's all learning that you did then through your intense self-healing pathway. It gave you those opportunities to know thyself, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And everyone can do it. And that's another thing, too. And that's something that I teach, because I teach a lot of sensitive people how to manage their energy. And a lot of them, you know, what you were saying earlier about people, you hear the word crazy a lot. I mean, I've had clients sitting in the chair opposite me who burst into tears when I've told them they're not crazy, that what's happening is real, you know? And it's so important. It's so important that that people who have these sensitivities understand that they're not alone and that they can manage them. They can learn how to live a vibrant, empowered, and energized lifestyle.
Well, and it's really a gift It's, empathy is a gift. It's not a curse. But I think a lot of people, until they learn how to put those management things in place, may really feel like this is the worst thing that could possibly be happening to me. I feel like out of control of what I have to receive in the world,
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
I do know on your Facebook page, which I would love for you to share with people, I do know that you had a series of video chats that are available where you are teaching empaths how to manage energies and how to shift through things. And, I definitely found those interesting. So can you tell people how to reach you on Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been loving the Facebook Lives. So they're on my professional page, which is Janet Raftis, energy healer and intuitive development coach. And I'm doing them every Tuesday at 5:15 Eastern. And basically it's 10 to 15 minutes. And each time I share 1 or 2 tips to help empaths and highly sensitive people manage their energy and work with their intuition in a more empowered way, in a way that feels good. So, and it's been super fun.
Well, and, your newsletter, you consistently have been talking about checking in with oneself and how to do that, how to be aware and be in the moment and be in forgiveness with yourself. I mean, this was over a series of months, the highlight reel, so to speak. So I definitely, I know I have been enlarged from reading your posts, and definitely would recommend to people to sign up for that if you don't do anything else. I mean, we're talking about absolutely free help. Many times people are very concerned because they're like, well, I can't afford therapy. I can't afford this or the other. But you can sign up for a newsletter and you can connect with a free video very easily. It's just a matter of making time for it. Now,
absolutely. Thank you.
Did you take a psychic development class then at some point when you were increasing your knowledge?
No, I didn't. But I read a lot. And really what happened for me was it just really, it was there, and it was just a question of opening it and re-embracing it and embracing it, So, but I did, like I said, I had that mentor early on, and she was really helpful for me just understanding what was going on. And then I worked a lot with my team, with my angels and guides, and I read a lot and studied a lot and listened to a lot of interviews like this. Listened to a lot of interviews like this.
Yes. And so at some point you decided that there was a void that you could fill based on your experience and what you saw out there, and you decided to step into teaching. So what has that looked like for you?
Well, it's so funny because for a long time I've always been a teacher, but I got my master's degree in Spanish literature, and I taught Spanish at Georgia State for a few years, and I was like, I know I'm a teacher, but this is not what I'm supposed to be teaching. So, every job I've ever done, even when I worked in the restaurant industry, I was the one who taught people. So I love teaching. I think that I am a born teacher. It is something that lights me up. And so it's always come very naturally to me. And so even when I was working, one-on-one, what I noticed was I was teaching people the same things over and over again, right? That's kind of how it starts, right? So at some point in time, you're like, well, you know what? All these people need to have this information, so I'm going to do a workshop. And then I'm going to do a workshop on this other thing. And then it's like, okay, well, let me just go ahead and teach something on intuitive development. And it's just been unfolding and become more and more and more. And so now I'm doing it in a lot of different ways. I teach online classes sometimes. I teach live workshops. I have one coming up in Atlanta next at the end of this month. I am going to be leading a retreat outside of Asheville in October that will have some intuitive and spiritual development. So it's just evolved But me being a teacher, like, I think I hopped out of the womb with that one.
Well, at least you're getting to teach something you are passionate about now. You know, that is a wonderful thing to be, like, really in a place of enjoying the life that is that you are actually actively manifesting. And it sounds like you, I mean, I thought the class that you have at the, in Atlanta, I think the title is like about releasing your superhero or something to that effect.
Activating your superpowers. Yes.
Activating your super, yes. I thought that was so cool because, you know, I'm like thinking X-Men and everything else. So what does a psychic experience like that entail with you?
2-day workshop, and on the first day we work with energy, so it's feeling, sensing, seeing, understanding energy, your energy body, energy of spaces, how we interact with energy, how we can shift energy, how intention works in shifting energy, and then from that we move into empathy, because that's the natural outcropping of that, is how to work with your energy field as an empath to feel stronger and more empowered. And then from empathy, we roll into inner wisdom. So that's tuning into your inner guidance system, right, which knows absolutely what's right for us, what's best for us. It's how our higher self speaks through us. And intuition really is how our higher self is speaking to us. And then on the second day, we go into working with the clairsenses, because, you know, I've found that everybody typically has one. They just probably don't know it. And at least one, right? And as we work with doing different, it's all very experiential. And as we work with different exercises and such, people are able to start tapping in. And then we talk about all of them and play with all of them. So what is amazing is that people discover that they have, you know, psychic senses they didn't even know that they had. From there, once we've cultivated that a bit, we go into working with guides and angels, and how to connect with them, and who are they, who's working with us, and so forth and so on, and how can we continue that relationship. So, and really I found with the Activate Your Superpowers classes and workshops is that everybody has experiences, you know. Yeah, and a lot of people have said to me, I mean, going back to what we talked about before, of like, oh my God, like now I can navigate the world in a different way, and this feels so much better to me. And that's really what, like, it's so important. It's so meaningful to me that can shift for someone.
Right. Now, the typical participant in your class, how would you describe where they're at, or maybe more than one typical kind of person who presents? Is it a person who is already kind of aware that they have a psychic, or are they coming from a place of, you know what, I just want to be my superpowers and I'm not thinking about anything as psychic, I just want to be awesome?
It's mostly people who recognize that they are sensitive, but they don't really understand what that means or what that could be for them. So it's kind of like they know it's there, and they're curious about it. And so they're usually like beginners to intermediate, I would say, that come into this particular Activate Your Super. Because really the Activate Your Superpowers is step one, right? You activate. And then from activating, you would move to cultivation of your superpowers or strengthening of your superpowers. And I do work with people beyond as well, people who are already open and are moving into more specific things. But for this particular thing, usually it's people who they know something's going on, it's a little bit much for them, and they're excited that there might be a way for them to deal with it in a way that feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
And are your audience typically women, or do you have women and men?
Mostly women. It's usually about like 10% men. I would say for every 7 to 10 women I have a man. That's usually how it works out. I recently did something where I had, in one of my classes, I had 3 men at once, and I was like, it was like almost half the class. I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Do you find that men are tapped in differently to their intuition, or is it pretty similar across the genders?
I think, my experience is that it's actually very similar, but that they come into it in a different way, right? Because for men, there's some more blocks to it because they've been, women, I think growing up, I was told I was too sensitive, right? But men really had that put on them, like, do not be sensitive, like, be a man up, right? All of that. So it's harder sometimes for the men to come through and to really step into it. Now, once they're working in their energies and their clear senses and with their empathy, I mean, men are just as empathetic as women when they're open to it, when they're working with it. They're just as sensitive as women when they're acknowledging their sensitivities, embracing them. It is still harder for men to embrace their sensitivities. It really is. I mean, one of the things, too, it's so funny, Scott and I laugh about this, and my partner, but one of the things that I, loved about him when we met was, you're so sensitive. And, for him to hear, that admiration for the sensitivity was powerful for him, Yeah, but and he is, and he's awesome.
Well, for our listening audience, I had Janet's partner, Scott Hall, on an interview just a few weeks ago, and I actually came into awareness of him from your newsletter when you sent it out. And one of your posts was what happens when two psychics sit down for breakfast? What does your breakfast conversation look like when the two of you are full-fledged psychics? Well, Archangel Michael was in my dream last night, and we went to so-and-so, and, I was talking to, and it was quite a humorous post, but, he came into my awareness at that time as well. And he did share that the empathy as a male was very challenging for him growing up as well. And so I think it's quite interesting that two highly empathic people have been able to come into, and both of you are doing healing work, and both of you are, reaching out to others like you to help shift their lives just as yours was shifted. I think that's very cool, So I definitely will refer people to check that out. His interview as well. The things that we have on the show do get put on the Viberarian YouTube channel, and as well the rebroadcast is always available here on Blog Talk Radio for people to tune back into at any given time. Now, do you have any classes that then are specific to an empath, like a workshop or anything that's available?
Yeah. So the Activate Your Superpowers, really the first day is dedicated to the empath. I work with, most of my clients are empaths, I've found. So pretty much everything I do is through the lens of an empath. That doesn't mean you have to be an empath to be in my class. You would still learn a lot even if you weren't. But I have just found, and because of my personal journey, and I think my background, and because of how I came about learning all this stuff, I attract empaths, hands down. So,
Yeah, people find who they need in terms of healing if you start to seek. That is one beautiful thing, is that I know that when people listen for the shows, that if they're dealing with it, that they will hear the episodes where somebody else has learned to come into full awareness of their empathy and transition to the gift receiving energy rather than the challenge receiving energy of that. Now, I did want to ask you, when you came from Costa Rica back to the United States, was it challenging for you in managing your energy?
Oh, my God. I think challenging is a gross understatement of what it was. Yes. So I was in a very small town on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. Dirt roads, trees everywhere, ocean. It was very quiet. the town at the time had a year-round population of probably 500, 750. I mean, there was a tourist population, but it was very quiet. And I came back here, and Nick moved right back into Atlanta, got a job in a restaurant, and it was really hard. Joelle, was one of the hardest things. I think looking back on it now, I mean, I think I really freaked out a little bit after I moved back. I didn't know that that's what was happening at the time, but it is what happened. And it took me probably, oh my God, I would say at least a year to like settle into it. I feel like now, as I look back on it, it was kind of a dark time. It was, I had stopped drinking really for the most part in Costa Rica, a little bit here and there, but I wasn't drinking very much, mostly because I had a small child and I was doing energy work, I was doing healing work, so I wasn't, it just wasn't happening. But when I moved back here, I started drinking again. It was almost immediate. And so after only a few months of being back here, I decided to get sober, like sober. And it was really because I got back here and I was like, it was the same thing. I was like, this is too much. This is too much. This is too much. This is too much. And I was waiting tables and bartending. And so I had to very, very quickly re-examine my life. And I saw that I was falling into old patterns from when I lived here before. And so I got sober. And that was, one of the best things that ever happened to me. The best thing, because due to my sobriety now, I am enjoying everything in my life so much. All my relationships, my practice, what I'm able to do now. Yeah.
Were you experiencing your psychic clairs at the time of when you came back, or so? When you're in a state of numbing, but you're still getting your guides, or are your guides trying to help you or having conversations with you? Does that add to the intensity then of all the bombardment from every level?
It really did. It numbed it some, but not all the way. And and I was definitely getting such clear messages. Oh my God, they were like flashing neon signs in front of me. So which was good, because like I said, it did happen pretty quickly. Like pretty quickly, I recognized what was happening and stopped it. And I really believe that a big part of that was because, well, I mean, on one level, I absolutely did not want to. I knew where it could go. I had been there before, and I did not want to go in that direction. I did not, and I really wanted to be able to be present for my son. And I saw that I was slipping away from that. Like I could feel that, And so that was like immediately was like, no, this is not where I want to go. And at the same time that was happening, my guides were really clear with me. I mean, I did get really clear messages that that sobriety was the way to go. And so it actually felt like when it happened, it was like when I made the decision, it was like, I mean, it was a spiritual moment for me. It was a highly spiritual moment for me, where I felt God washing over me, It was beautiful. And I have not even, that was 8.5 years ago, and I have absolutely zero desire to put anything intoxicating in my body. I mean, I would not mess up what I've got going on right now for the world. It's just.
It sounds very much like your God epiphany in terms of even when you discovered there was God, and then God washed over you at those other points, and your discovery of Archangel Michael. It seems like you have very strong transitional awarenesses that happen in your journey.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that, but I do. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because sometimes people look for that kind of, Jesus healed the blind man, instantaneous kind of conversion from something like, well, now I'm psychic. Now I do this, now I do that. And sometimes that happens, but other times it is a slow movement and revelation that's slowly, and I think a lot of times people just beat themselves up because they say, well, mine didn't happen like that, or mine should have happened like this, and to hear perspectives from people who had like a combination of both. You had slow healing and you had instantaneous like conversions, both in your experience.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And, and thinking about it in the way that you've just laid it out is that, it was most likely some of those white light moments were also like when I had that God moment and what did wash over me, I mean, that was also could have been and most likely was the product of years of intense self-healing. So even though I had had a little slide backwards, I had had enough healing to where you can't unsee what you've seen, right? You can't. You can try to, but it's like I couldn't, all the work I had done, it was still there inside of me. And that had primed me to have that moment, right? To have that moment of rapture almost,
Right. And that's what the term rapture means, like a sudden epiphany or ecstatic epiphany, which to change 180 degrees or from one perspective to another in rapid fashion, Now, do you do any specific workshops for people who have been challenged with substance numbing and addictions?
I don't, but I do work with a lot of people who, I don't work with a lot of people who need to get sober, or I hate to put need to get sober on it. I don't have a lot of people come to me and say, I need to get sober. I have a lot of people come to me and say, I just stopped drinking or I just stopped using. It's interesting. I get a lot of people who are right on the other side of it, or people who are maybe into even several years of sobriety, but who are dealing with some sort of shift in their perspective around sobriety. And that doesn't mean that they're going to go back to drink, but in how they work with their recovery. So I get a lot of people who are looking to change to bring more of the spiritual aspect into their recovery.
Okay, right. That higher power, and I think, bring it in.
Totally. I mean, I really think that it is my connection to God, and it's not, I don't know how to relay this in with the proper reverence for it, because it's not like God keeps me sober. I mean, I keep myself sober, but my connection to God, my connection to Spirit, my the way that I'm living my life right now, in that contact with Spirit, right? That conscious contact with Spirit, that keeps me sober. And if my spiritual connection were not this strong, then I don't know if I would stay sober. But as it is now, I'm like, I can't fathom it being any different because I feel blessed.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that connection is driving from your Reiki and Pranic healing and Matrix healing, and your, it's like being bathed in it in a persistent state. So I will say that is very euphoric, you know what I'm saying, to be tuned in at times to a creator source. It is, you can, I felt quite tipsy at times, a little lightheaded and unstable on my feet, because it is quite large. You get a sense of the largeness compared to ourselves of that energetic source. Now, when you were in Costa Rica, did you encounter any of the medicine healing paths, like ayahuasca?
No, it's so funny. I read a book right before my son was born. I was pregnant when I read this book called The Cosmic Serpent, which is a really, really good and interesting book. And are you aware of it, or have you read it?
No, I've heard it, but I've never read it.
So it was really interesting. It was a European scientist, went to the jungles of Peru. He was studying the double helix in DNA, and he ended up in a ceremony in the jungles of Peru. And so that was how I learned about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca was not as popular as it was now. I've never heard of it before. And when I heard about it, I was like, whoa, that sounds really cool. I want to do that. And but I was in Costa Rica, and there aren't ceremonies in Costa Rica. I had a friend who went down to Peru. This was probably like 13 years ago, so it still was not a big thing in the United States. A friend who went and did it, and I was still intrigued by it. And but now I don't have any desire to do it at all. Like I just don't feel like I need it. I have an amazing connection to source. I feel like I go, every time I do a remote healing, I feel like I go on some sort of sacred journey because I'm actually feeling myself traveling through space and time. And all the answers that I need, I can access. So it's not, and then throw in there as well. I mean, that's my experience. But put in there as well that I just don't want to be altered in any way. I have no desire to be altered by anything external. So,
I figured in your current context you would not, but I didn't know if prior to that last transition if you had actually experienced that or not.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. When I first heard of it, I was like, that sounds cool, and I'm sure it is. And I've heard amazing stories about it. And for some people, that is their path, you know. And for me, I had a glimpse of it, and it looked really cool. And then I had a glimpse of it, and it didn't look so cool anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what, I did experience the medicine path while I was in Mexico, and I can say it was quite revelatory. I mean, it definitely was one of those life-altering reality. The cosmic serpent, of course, I can relate to understanding even that terminology. So I'm definitely going to check out the book. But it is not something that I would say anybody who is looking for a simple recreational kind of high experience. It is not that at all. But I do know that there have been a lot of studies that talk about the extreme healing that people can do who are dealing with extreme addictions like drugs, like heroin and cocaine and things of that nature. It really, but it's rather a harsh kind of dealing with oneself while in that psychedelic state. And
I've heard that too.
Benefit,
Yeah, there's another medicinal plant that's not ayahuasca. I can't remember the name of it now, but it has been used specifically to help people come off of. Toad-based medicine. Yes. I did not do this toad medicine. I have several friends that I made down in Mexico that do the Sapo awakening experiences, but I felt that it was a bit more of a masculine energetic experience rather than ayahuasca, which is a feminine energy, and I just didn't want to blast my brain open in a 15-minute life review. It just seemed a little bit too much for me. But I do know that you bring people out of the country, and you, clearly because you lived out of the country for a significant period of time, there must be something in you that is drawn to travel. And so, what do you do with retreats outside of the country? Well, it's funny. That's something within me that's drawn to travel is a Sagittarius. It's my own mind. I have traveled my whole life, and a lot of travel. And I lived in Argentina as well, and I've traveled on my own. So I have definitely been looking to. I wanted to incorporate travel into my work. So I do the retreats with Alicia Miller, a fellow Sagittarius, and we take people to Costa Rica, and that's been really, really amazing. Those retreats are really powerful healing retreats. This, we call it the Sacred Emotion Retreat. And then I also, I want to incorporate and doing, so I did a workshop out in Southern California in June, and I would like to travel more for workshops and retreats. And I want to be able to incorporate Scott into that as well. So we'll see how that plays out, because, he's a very talented channel and musician and artist and
photographer.
So, yes, my piece of God, he's truly a Renaissance man.
That is wonderful to have that. I do know that travel, when you get out of your, what do they say, you change your latitude, change your attitude. I think Corona used that for their beer commercials, but on a larger sense. I spent 6 months in Playa del Carmen, Mexico last year, and it was transformative. And I'm feeling the call to Chiang Mai, Thailand. And there's so many places that are energetic sources where, Costa Rica is one of those things. I'm always seeing people on yoga retreats and healing retreats in Costa Rica. So there's certain energy in these places around the world, certainly in the United States, Asheville, Sedona, things like that. You do get a sense of that. But to be in a different cultural dynamic and, like you said, the energy of a city environment in Atlanta versus the quiet, non-technology, time-driven focus that happens in many places outside of the United States, it does shift. And it seems like the days are longer and the colors are more vibrant because you're really much more present. So I can see the lure of the travel, especially if you're doing transformation work with people. I think that's really exciting, and I've heard wonderful things about your retreats, that they definitely are life-changing for people. So do you have any coming up in the next 6 months or so, or a year?
Yes, so we have one in 2 weeks, in a week and a half. It's sold out, though. But it is, it's the one with Alicia Miller, and we try to do 2 a year. And it's really amazing. We the one we use for the Sacred Emotion Retreat in Costa Rica it feels like it is on sacred land. And Costa Rica is, I think, a lot of Central and South America and Asia have sacred ground in them. And I experienced my first portal when I was in Costa Rica. The Sacred Emotion Retreat we host it's on a quartz mountain, and it's up in the rainforest, and it's like isolated, and there are toucans that land in the tree next to you at breakfast, and there are monkeys and all the wildlife, and it's so green and so beautiful. And it's overlooking, overlooking the Nicoya Peninsula, which the Nicoya Peninsula empties out into the Pacific Ocean. So it's just really a magical, magical place. And you're right, like when we can put ourselves in over or within land that is healing in and of itself, it magnifies everything else that we do, right? It's just, and also taking everybody out of their everyday life. I mean, it is powerful to be able to spend a week away from your family and the grocery store and the car and all of that, and to be really nurtured and held and fed like organic farm-to-table food and to be pampered. Like, that is really valuable to the healing experience.
Absolutely. So what does your itineraries look like? You said it's a week in Costa Rica?
Yeah, it's a week in Costa Rica, and the way that Alicia and I run our retreat is that we meet in circle twice a day for a few hours, and in those circles we explore through core emotional work, which is Alicia's model, and then through energy work, which is mine. We explore trauma, childhood, experiences that are negatively, or I don't like to use the words positive and negative so much, but that are impacting our lives today in a way that is detrimental or challenging. And we help people to access the repressed emotions, to find the expression of them to shift limiting beliefs and to basically crack themselves open. And then in between sessions, every day there's yoga twice a day. It's optional, but it's available every day. We do a dance release ceremony. We do a fire ceremony. We do a lot of intention setting and meditating. People use the biomats in between sessions. They have time to process. I mean, there's just a lot. Everything is geared towards everybody feeling nurtured and held and seen and heard
I've heard
and
good
loved.
things about biomats. I've heard great things about the biomats.
Amazing.
They're
my
packed
God.
with crystals, right?
Oh, they're packed with crystals. They release negative ions. They're so relaxing. They help to reset the nervous system. They help to detoxify the body. They're amazing. I use them during my in-person sessions, and it really is impactful. It really contributes to a deeper experience.
Now, how many people typically are in one of your retreats?
Usually 7. Yeah,
okay.
We make it an intimate affair.
Okay.
Yeah. It's important for everybody to have time to speak at every session, and it's important to be able to really hold an extreme, because everybody is we're sharing things that many women haven't even remembered, the memories that are coming up. There's a real sense of connection, openness, vulnerability, and intimacy. And so we want to intentionally keep our circle small and intimate and held.
And so information about all of your workshops and events and retreats is available on your website, correct?
Yes, on my website, which is janetraftis.com. And then I have, as I said, the workshop at the end of this month, but also in October, I have a retreat that is a spiritual and intuitive development retreat. So it'll be a little different than the workshop. There's a little bit of overlap, but a lot of the retreat will be creating sacred space, working with the sacred land. It's outside of Asheville, speaking of sacred land. So it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be really, and I think really, really powerful in a different way.
And that'll be beautiful because it will be fall in Asheville, and I've heard that is absolutely magnificent. I have not been to Asheville. I've been in Atlanta 25 years. I haven't been to Asheville yet. I don't know. It's on my list. It's definitely on my list.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, we're getting in the final few minutes of your interview here, but I wanted to ask you, so you have a son, and is he also psychically gifted in terms of, or has he had like empathy? Were you able to usher in his sensitivity differently than like what you might have experienced? And on top of that, do you do any of your classes or workshops that are oriented to teens who might be dealing with the things that you dealt with in your high school years?
Okay, yes, those are great questions. So my son is intuitive and empathic. And yes, he's had a very different experience because we've always been very open about all of it. He's also Reiki attuned. He's a teenager now, so he doesn't use it, but he did when he was younger. He is earthbound spirits are extremely connected to Jake. They love him. And actually that's the reason why I learned how to do house clearings. I mean, the reason I learned everything I know about house clearings, which is a service that I actually offer along with Scott now, it is due to the fact that we were getting like infestations of earthbound spirits. It was out of control. And it was because of my son. And he's very psychic, so he could see them, he could hear them, he could feel them. They would touch him, he could feel it. It was extremely disconcerting for a while. And so I had to really up my game there. That was all that started. He's 14 now. I would say it was really, really intense when he was about 10. And now he also, through that, I was able to teach him. He knows how to cross spirits over now.
Oh, wow.
He knows which ones are, okay to be around and which ones aren't, and so forth and so on. We have a house full of sensitive people. So offering workshops. I have taught children Reiki before, and I am thinking about doing a class. I have not offered it yet, but it's on my radar to do a workshop for teenagers, probably like 12 to 18, to help them with their empathic and intuitive gifts.
Mm-hmm. That seems like a critical age because you are been vulnerable to those numbing opportunities through other substances and unhealthy attachments with other teenagers. And even emotional dumping takes place in the teen space in terms of narcissist or abusive relationship patterns. Oftentimes are the first boyfriends and girlfriends people have, and they don't know how to manage that under the best of circumstances. And then if you throw being empathetic or highly sensitive on top of it, it would seem to make you rather at a vulnerable or at-risk population. So that's why I was wondering if you were bringing your experience then into that healing for that age group. Especially for females,
Yeah.
So
and I do see as I do see a lot of my clients bring their daughters in for sessions and so forth because of that very reason. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it has been wonderful having you come on the interview this evening. And I actually have a caller who does have a question about house clearing. So if you hold on one moment. Is this Lori?
Indeed it is.
Hi, welcome to the Psychic Inside Show. I understand you have a question about house clearing and the full moon.
Oh, yeah. I did it 2 months ago, but maybe it's not clean enough. What advice would you give me? Because there's still a lot of activity. It's not the most positive.
Okay. What have you done in your home for clearing?
Lit the white candles, said prayers, and also did the sage cleaning, the huge white sage. We went through every corner, every closet, we did everything, every window. Started upstairs and went clockwise. Invested a lot of time and effort in doing it. And So if you have spirits in the house, then they need to be ushered out of the house or crossed over. And sage won't do that. Sage will clear the environmental energies, but it won't move spirits on. So one thing that you can do is, you're the boss of your house. So it's, boundaries with the spirit world are the same as they are with the physical world. So you could tell them to get out. Don't ask. You don't have to be nice about it. Just say, get out. Some will go easily. Some will be more stubborn. But you have, it's your house. Like, you can tell them to get out. You can also call on Archangel Azrael to help them cross over if you don't know how to do that. But that's something you can learn to do as well. I'm getting that you're sensitive to them. You know where they are and what their energy is. Yeah. Oh, very sensitive. Yes.
Yeah. So, tell them to go to the light. Tell them that the family's waiting for them. Tell them that they're forgiven and that they will know love when they get there. Again, some will go easily, some will be more stubborn, but you can call on Archangel Azrael to cross them over as well.
I did that with the white candle. I called them in. I had the white candle on all day. The big
one, and I just said, all is forgiven. I love you, and I want the best for you. Please go into the light. Go where you need to go. It's not here. I mean, I've done that, and I don't even know if it's spirits or if it's the energy of the people who lived here before me.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I feel like is that one thing that I'm getting is that they come into your house. And so a more effective seal around your property would be good. Because I feel like what they're kind of showing me is that, one goes and another one comes in. The energy, what I'm getting is that the stagnant energy you cleared.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, the stagnant energy is cleared. It's just the energy. You have a few that are stubborn, and you have they're coming in. Your house is like it feels like an invitation to them. Does that feel right to you? I mean, that's what I'm getting. They like see a light there, and they're like, oh, look at her house. Let's go hang out with Lori.
I'm so sensitive, and I was reading your website, and I'm like, oh, this is my life story. This is my life story. I can relate. I go more towards the, 520 hertz music, the 432, always lifting the vibration in here, happy, positive, careful about who I'm allowed to come into the house. So I don't know why they keep cutting it like a revolving door. You just took the words, oh, you must be psychic. You took the words right out of my mind because I was going to say it's like a revolving door around here.
Yeah. Yeah. So the boundaries need to be more effective that are around your house. The seal needs to be more effective. You can work with the angels with that. One thing that I do is I use a lot of golden light, and I will put, every place that I go to now is like basically bathed in golden light. I have angels on the corners of the property, and I have like a very explicit understanding that no, they're not allowed in without my permission.
Okay.
And it's just like almost like my inner badass with it. Like I'm a sweet, loving person, but when I'm dealing with like the spirits over there, I'm like a badass. I'm like an energy ninja. I'm like, you need to get the hell out.
Okay.
And it's just like you got to be kind of forceful in that way with it. You are sovereign over your body. You're sovereign over your home. You're sovereign over your property. And none of them can get in without your permission, but you've got to kind of lay down the law. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. The lady's energy who used to live here before was always harassing when I'd go to sleep and slapping me in the face. And I turned around and I just yelled, because I was home alone, this is no longer your house. Get out. You don't live here anymore. You're not alive. Leave me alone. Sorry, but you didn't take care of it. Now go. And she left. But somebody still slaps me, or they tickle. They start making sounds in my ear when I take a nap during the day. I don't know what it is about during the day that they come around.
They're active at that time. Yeah, the same thing. You did the same thing. I mean, the way you just described the way you talked to the former owner of the house was perfect. I mean, I felt it in your voice.
Yeah, I had to because we've only lived here like a year and a half, and it started right away. And I can be totally energetic, and as soon as I come inside this house, I'm in pain and everything's hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want, Lori, feel free to reach out to me through my website, and we can talk more in depth about some things that might be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And I'm so glad to be able to dial into a show like this where you guys don't think I'm just totally
right.
Almost calling incognito. You can't talk to people. You can't talk to your friends or family members because they're not where you're at yet. Who knows if they'll ever get there? And you don't have. We live in a world all our own. You know that. I know that. Yeah. It's lonely in this world. So that's why I'm so grateful for shows like this, where even though we can't see each other, we still can.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even more fully, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, thank you so much for calling in this evening. And definitely, if you're on Facebook, please connect with me and the Viberarian community, because it's certainly a whole tribe of people who are talking the same kind of talk and having the conversations and experiences that we've been talking about this evening.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely reach out and connect with Janet. She is amazing, as you can tell, an amazing healer. So I thank you for calling this evening, and we're going to wind up the show here because we're on just our last few minutes. And Janet, I just really thank you so much for your appearing here this evening on the Psychic Inside show. It really has been interesting getting to talk with you about your journey, and I know that someone is going to be uplifted by hearing your empathy journey and your self-healing journey. Is there any last wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience as we close?
Oh, thank you so much, Joelle. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. And, I think that the one piece of wisdom that is so valuable is that the wisdom is within us. We all have access to the answers within us, and learning to tune into that and to trust it is the one thing that can align us with everything that we want and desire and feel to be true for us.
As you were saying that, I'm from Kansas, and my inner Dorothy was hearing Glenda say to Dorothy, "It was in you all along, my dear."
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Yes. Oh, yes, thank you so much. This has been the Psychic Inside Show, and I'm the Viberarian, and I've been having a conversation with Janet Raftis, and I invite you to tune in next week on Tuesday for another episode where we get to hear about someone else's journey as they've discovered their psychic gifts and abilities. Until we meet again in the airspace, I do wish you all of the blessings that you can have to overflowing abundance, more than you could possibly carry in your little arms. So, namaste.
Thank you.